today for the July 10th weekly check-in. We are excited today to be talking about association content strategies in a changing world, and even more excited that Carrie Hane and Hilary Marsh are here with us today to talk about it. Hi guys. Thanks for taking the time. So what we thought we would do today is give a quick overview of the study for any of the folks who have not had the chance to download or review it yet. If you do want to download the study, you see the link on my screen. It is free to ASAE members, and there's a nominal $9.95 charge for non-members. So we're going to do just a quick overview, but then in discussion with Hilary and Carrie, really unpack some of the high-level findings from the study, and then hopefully be able to answer any questions that you all have about it. Okay? Let me jump right in.
Also, I just wanted to add that unlike other sessions where you're interviewing somebody else with a story, you're a part of this story as well. So the three of us did it together. That makes this call a little different than most of the ones that you lead.
Yeah, we were definitely the trio that had the opportunity to do this. That was great. So why did ASAE do this study? They had a number of indicators from some of the other research they had done with their membership and also their environmental scanning that associations are definitely in the content business. So the question they really wanted to answer was, how are associations managing the challenges and changes in today's environment? About how they create, facilitate, manage, curate, and distribute all the knowledge and the learning that they create throughout their organizations. So that was how kind of the genesis of the study for the foundation came up, and they comprised a team of folks to help them manage that. And we worked very closely with them during all the research that we did. So the research was kind of in 3 to 4 different phases. We did a literature review, we did 2 different surveys, and we also did a number of interviews to follow each of those surveys. So this kind of gives you the scope of how many people we talked to. And I think that was our first surprise, right? I mean, we kind of knew from our own work, Carrie and Hilary, that a lot of people were doing content strategy, but when we were able to apply these numbers of organizations and people, I think that was a really happy surprise for us.
Yeah, I think that both there are organizations doing content strategy that don't know it, and other organizations thinking they're doing content strategy when they're really doing something else. Yeah. So having the solid view of what the scope is, I think made us all really happy.
Yeah, definitely. Because we only hear from a few people.
Right.
But clearly there's a lot more out there. And I think that was not only a nice surprise just as a feel-good thing, but also for lending the legitimacy to this research. It's not just based on 50 people, it's 600 people, and that's a lot.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. So 2 of the initial things that came from the surveys that we did and the initial interviews were, we were able to kind of draw a line in the sand to actually define what content strategy is. So there's a living, written, documented definition out there. And then to get to an initial measurable, to Hilary's point about, people are doing content strategy but might not even know it. We started with tactics first and defined 18 different tactics in the report that comprise a content strategy practice. So that was one initial way that we were able to enable people to get their arms around what functions they were doing within the organization that lead to content strategy practice.
Well, and even help them answer the question, am I doing content strategy or not?
Right. But I think the most exciting part, besides the tactics, because content strategy is not just tactics, we were able to define a content strategy maturity model. And that's what we're going to spend some of the elements talking about today, some of the high-level findings that help comprise this idea of a content strategy maturity model. And I think the biggest one, and it'll be hard not to spend all our time talking about this piece, is the culture piece and the power of content strategy to really change the culture of associations and nonprofit organizations.
Do you want me to chime in?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just take a step back for a second. So the value of content strategy in general is to help members really see to help members really understand the value they're getting by being part of your association and really the community that is your association, to show what they're getting for their dues dollars, and as a result being more satisfied with their membership, likelier to stay, all of that. And so if then that's the goal, then content is the way your work is manifested in the world. So content represents the programs and really offerings you have. So if you've got an advocacy program, education, meetings, all of that is content, etc. And to present a holistic view of what your association is offering, you have to be holistic on the back end. And we all know that isn't always the case, that associations sometimes are siloed or even full of conflict. And so the end goal, and you can see it in the advanced, is a collaborative culture. But we know that not everybody starts there. So your content can't be holistic if your organization is not holistic. And to get there, everyone has to be willing to see that the program they're working on is part of the bigger whole. And the content about the program they're working on has to be presented as part of the bigger whole as well, which is a challenge. And it's a journey. So I love that final bullet point of it's a journey, because everything we talk about it has a starting point and then a ideal end point. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, and I think that scale piece, Carrie, is another key that we saw, especially in the interviews.
Yeah, so what we found, in addition to a culture that is more holistic and collaborative as people advance through their maturity, is it doesn't matter what size you are. We talked to one organization that had 3 staff members. We talked to people with hundreds. And they were all over the place. So size didn't matter. But what content strategy looks like in a 3-person organization or 5 or 10 person looks very different from a larger organization, but it can be done. And in some ways it's easier at the smaller organizations because they don't have the bureaucracy and the siloed nature of the larger organizations. Yeah, so I think, again, not necessarily a surprise to us because we've been working in this, but it was really nice to see that played out, that nobody's too small, nobody's too big, no budget's too small. Certainly no one knows what a too large budget looks like.
Well, that doesn't even compute to larger budget.
So,
Never, ever.
But yeah, it doesn't depend on size or budget. It depends much more on the culture and willingness of the people within the organization to do things differently.
Yeah. And I think that this next bullet point idea of content strategy being everyone's job, one thing that we saw in both large and small organizations, I believe, is that someone kind of took the reins of content strategy for whatever reason they came up with. They wanted to test drive content strategy because they knew what it was, or they launched into some initiative because of a website redesign or a revamp of a department of some sort that they wanted to distribute their education content more fully, and launched into a content strategy practice. And so I think this idea of it being everyone's job, but then balancing that, Hilary, with the culture piece, that if you are really embracing content strategy, you have to incorporate that into everyone's job.
And more than that, right? A lot of times, so if we track back people's job and their department and how it's cast and their how it's budgeted. So I think that content strategy is an HR issue, because if people's job description doesn't include creating, or in partnership, creating the content about their program in partnership with content experts, then they're not going to do it. They're going to see their job as either not at all sometimes, or all of it with, get out of my way sometimes. And I've seen that all. But it's bigger than the individual person. It's how their job is cast, how their department is budgeted, and how really the people at the top envision the organization as a whole. Because I think that sometimes the CEO or the senior VPs don't understand that they're contributing to the siloed nature of things and the separateness that leads to the internal conflict later.
Right. And Carrie, just any comments you want to reinforce about the journey piece, because I think it really applies to walking through the model.
Yeah, just like there's nothing too big or too small, you can start anywhere. But you do have to start at the beginning. You have to take one step, and then two, and then maybe you can take 5 steps. But you can start anywhere, and it can be one person, it can be a department. More likely it is one person or a department than a whole organization, but then you bring the whole organization along. So, and you never know after you take that first step what the rest of the journey is going to hold, but that shouldn't stop you from getting started.
Right.
I think ultimately the role of content strategy is a little bit like an orchestra conductor, to bring together and have permission to highlight the different pieces of work that the organization is doing in a way that is holistic and just smart, timely, relevant, all of that. And so that permission is the key thread, I think, that starts at the beginning. And so again, what Carrie said, it doesn't matter where you start, but building that thread and starting somewhere and gaining traction, is the role of the content strategist, to bring all of the organization's work together.
Great. So that was, as I promised, a very quick overview of that report. But I wanted to give folks a chance to ask questions either on the chat, which you'll find at the bottom of your Zoom application, or folks that are online, if you want to jump in with your unmuting your mic, you can certainly do that. We just wanted to give you the opportunity. Go ahead, Jeff.
I have a question about the focus row in the model. Can you describe what that is meant to cover?
The focus is about what the organization or the people doing the work are focused on. So at the beginning, it is on tactics. It's not necessarily strategic. It might just be a couple things here and there. And then they start, as it grows, they can become more strategic. And then at the next level of maturity, they're trying to frame that strategy with new models for how to operate and the processes around those, and starting to bridge the gap between the departments. And then finally, once all that's complete and they make the transition to a more collaborative environment where things are happening more on their own because it's all been established, it's maintaining that the environment of collaboration, of being holistic, of thinking about the outcome and the member value rather than any short-term things, so that you stay focused on the goal and not on the tactics. So that's that's really what that one is about.
Yeah, TJ, you had a question? Can you unmute your mic?
No, I'm sorry. I was waving because I have to leave. I'm sorry.
Oh, just saying. Okay.
Thank you for
Bye.
sharing. Thanks for sharing. I look forward to read the report.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else on video or on chat with questions at this point? I will be posting the recording on Content Forum, so if you have any questions, certainly add them to the comments, because we'll put a little summary online so we can keep the conversation going as people start to read the report and come up with any questions along the way. Becky?
I don't know if my mic is working. Can you hear me?
Yes, now.
Oh, good. Okay. It's the first time I've used it. So, did you encounter any feedback from organizations who rely heavily on external sources for content? So organizations who don't really generate or create their content themselves, but maybe have, are really relying on trying to pull together and curate from external places.
Good. I'm racking my brain.
I've worked personally with organizations whose members create the content versus the staff.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think there's anybody that we talk to who isn't a content generator. But, I think that it depends on what you see as content. So if we're talking
Like
about
journals,
industry news and trends,
kind of stuff count.
sure.
Yeah.
Lots of organizations do that. We didn't really ask them explicitly about that. But if content is your work, then you're not bringing in advocacy information from other people. You're not bringing in conference information from other people or public awareness campaigns from other people. That's the work that you do. That is content or original research or that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think the research piece is where my head went to, like with journal content, which, would be produced by typically the subject matter expert membership, not necessarily the folks that are on staff, right? So I think we heard a little bit of an inkling about the challenges of that, kind of getting the buy-in of the journal editorial boards with the content strategy effort. Are they measuring the same things the same way as other things are being measured internally, to Carrie's point about what are the outcomes? But I think that is something that would definitely need to be further explored. I think it's a great question, and I think more associations are going to start dealing with that, and I definitely think nonprofits deal with that. So I think it'd be great to unpack that in kind of a phase 2.
Thank you.
But Jeff, you were participating in that part of the conversation too, and I didn't hear what you said sort of between the lines.
It was the question about external content being journals, the academic journals that are either created by industry that are affiliated with the association, but maybe not actually even their members or staff. And that content being, we've got projects where that content is indexed and tracked and sorted and categorized so that it shows up in the appropriate place as you'd find an event or a publication or something else. So that might be an example, although some of those are as close to the organization as anything else, and others are more tangential, member created, or sector specific, that they're just the curators or the sponsoring agent.
Yeah.
I think I see that a lot particularly with very small organizations who are looking for valuable substance to sort of contribute to their web property, but really have to go external because they don't have the staff or resources to create internally.
Right. I think the other gap there that we see, and I'm trying to be conscious of time, but I love the conversation, so if people have to go, I understand. I think the other gap there is in the education content, like from conferences or seminars and things like that. Often that's treated separately, and so bringing them into the fold during the content strategy planning piece and getting those ideas for taxonomy and measurables and all those other things organized. So going forward, things can be executed better and the outcomes can be measured more holistically. That's another gap that certainly exists. Okay. Again, because I'm being conscious of time, I think we'll stop. But again, we'll post this and hopefully continue the conversation online in Content Forum. And then if there is interest later down the line, maybe we can have some other discussions about the report once folks have a chance to dig in. So thanks very much for attending. And Hilary and Carrie, thanks very much for taking the time today.
Yeah, nice to see you all.
Yeah, great
Thank
to
you.
share.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.